my channel. I'm Neha, working in a healthcare company and based in Germany. Have you ever wondered why can't companies simply test the drug on humans and get the approval for drug faster? Why do they wait for years and years to complete the clinical trials? And what is basically this concept called as clinical trials? Why do we do it? We are going to talk about all this in today's video. Let's start. Pharmaceutical companies are dealing with lives, right? And that's why they cannot put patients' life on stake. If the safety and efficacy part of the drug is not studied well, it can lead to serious side effects or even sometimes the death of the patients. That's why the regulation evolved and became more and more strict with time. Health authorities need sufficient data in their hand before they approve any drug, just to be sure and confident that the drug is safe to use. They rely on data because we know that data does not lie, right? Yes, it does not lie. But the question comes from where this data comes. So this data usually comes from the studies called clinical studies. That means study your drug on the humans. So now you know from where this data comes. This data comes from clinical studies or clinical trial, right? Now the next question which will be coming to your mind, how these clinical trials or clinical studies are performed. So to answer this, I've tried to explain this concept in a very easy way in this video. So even the person who is very new to this concept can understand it. The first thing which is very important for us to know is that the phase-wise approach is followed for the clinical trial. That means it starts with phase 1 clinical trial, which include a smaller number of people, and then moving forward to phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4 with increasing number of people. The idea behind this phase-wise approach is that we do not want to expose the greater number of people to the drug at a time until we have good confidence about the safety and efficacy of the drug. And the second thing is that each phase is designed to answer certain questions. The data which we acquire from one phase is used as the foundation to move to the next stage. It looks interesting, right? So let us deep dive into each phase one by one. First, let's start with phase 1 clinical trial. As I said, each phase answers certain question and it starts with a smaller number of people. So, what does this phase 1 clinical trial tells us? This phase tells us if the drug is safe to use. So what do we do in this phase? In this phase, we test the drug usually on the healthy people. And why did I use this word usually? Because in situations like cancer, we cannot expose healthy people to the anti-cancer drug, right? And that's why we select patients instead of healthy people in such kind of situations. That's why I used word usually healthy people. So we know this phase is used to evaluate the safety. This phase involves usually healthy people. But now the question comes, how many people are selected? So people are less in number, usually around 20 to 80. The objective of this phase is to determine the best dose at which we have the least side effects. So how do physicians perform this study? They provide a very low dose of drug to a few people, and then the dose of the drug is increased gradually over the time. And they measure two things basically. What is the body's response and which doses level are safe and well tolerated. So this is what we study majorly in phase 1 clinical trials. So once our questions are answered and the drug is recognized to be safe, then we'll move to the next phase, that is phase 2 clinical trial. Now coming to phase 2 clinical trial. What does this phase tells us? So phase 2 clinical trials tells us if the drug is efficacious. That means whatever is the purpose of that drug, is it actually working for that disease or not? And of course, some additional information, for example, safety or any other potential risk are also collected during this phase. In phase 1, we used healthy people for studies. But in this phase, patients are involved instead of healthy people. And why we are using patients and not the healthy people? Because we want to study if the drug is working, right? If the drug is efficacious or not. And we can only evaluate that if we are using the patients who are having that disease, because if our drug is actually able to cure that disease or not, this is what we are intending to see in this phase, right? So now the next question which will be coming to your mind, how many patients are we selecting? So the number is more than phase 1, it's around 100 to 300 people. Once our questions are answered in this phase, and if the drug is recognized to be effective, then we'll move to the next phase, which is phase 3. So in phase 3, you must be wondering, we have also got to know safety in phase 1, we have also got to know efficacy and other factors in phase 2. Now what we are going to do in this phase? So in phase 3, basically these are kind of a confirmatory trial. So we confirm the results of phase 1 and phase 2 usually in these trials. And also we again select the patients like we selected in the phase 2, right? So we select the patients for these studies, and the patients number is more than phase 2. So it is around 300 to 3000, and of course the number will vary depending on the statistical analysis. Once the phase 3 is completed, and if everything goes well, and then we'll go to the next step, which is the submission of marketing authorization application to health authorities with all the information that we have collected so far. So if the drug is approved, doctors can prescribe the drug to the patient and your drug is in market now. So now the next phase starts when your drug is in market. That phase is called as a phase 4 clinical trial. Because it is after the marketing of the drug, this is also called as the post-approval or post-marketing studies. Now you must be wondering that the drug was already studied in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, and based on the results only, the health authorities have approved, given us the approval, right? Then after the approval, what is the purpose of these clinical trials? Why are we doing this? So companies collect some additional information about the drug, whatever else they need to know. For example, what are the longer term risks and benefits, any unseen side effect which they could not recognize in other phases, right? So they will like to evaluate after marketing on a broader and a larger number of population. So that is the intention of this phase. So overall, these were the 4 phases of the clinical trial. I would like to introduce a pretty new concept to you, which is called as a phase 0 clinical trial. What is this phase 0 clinical trial? I guess with the name itself, you must have definitely realized that phase 0, it comes before phase 1. If you are thinking so, you are right. Yes. So phase 0, this is a pretty new concept which was introduced by FDA in 2006. And why they introduced this concept? Because failing faster is better than failing late. So if you are failing at phase 1, it is better that you fail before that. So that's why this phase was introduced. And in this phase, you will give a very low dose of a drug to the smaller number of people. Usually around 10 to 12 number of people you will select. So because you are exploring your drug in this phase, right? These trials are also called as exploratory trial. The main purpose of this phase 0 trial is to check if the drug is actually working in the human body as it should. Also, we collect some additional information as part of these studies, like pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic related information. So based on this, if the companies are confident, then only the most promising molecules get into the next step, that is phase 1. Please note, some of the other phase of clinical trials may be skipped depending on what type of molecules we are working on. For example, phase 2 studies can be skipped in biosimilar molecule, and directly phase 3 can start after phase 1. Also, you must be wondering, if a typical clinical study takes this much time, how come COVID vaccine got approval so early? The clinical trial itself is a very big topic, and there is a lot to learn in this. However, the purpose of this video was to introduce this concept to you, so that in my next video, whenever we talk about phase 1, phase 2 or phase 3 and so on, you are familiar with these terminologies. Do you know Out of all the clinical trials that we discussed today, which clinical trial is also called as microdosing clinical trial? If you know the answer, then please comment in the comment section. I will reveal the answer next week. Till then, let's stay connected for the next videos.